Well, it was such a great sabbatical. It's so good to be back. I missed you guys so much. And Amy and I made a decision during the sabbatical. You see, we've been married for almost 14 years, and we decided, things are so smooth right now, and we're all sleeping at the house so well and so good. Let's mess that up. Let's add somebody to the family. And so, Selah, will you bring your new puppy up here, please? I'll introduce you to Sophie. This is Sophie. I'm just going to have an altar call right now. Can accept Sophie into your heart, and it'll all be good. This is Sophie, and she's just, look, Sophie, you're famous. Sophie, as you can see, is a puppy, and she's little. Now we're hoping she gets bigger, right? Because she's pretty small. But I've learned a few things about puppies. First of all, that they don't sleep through the night. It's much like having a baby. But Sophie does some things that are so cute. I mean, she has these little noises. And then she also she loves to play. And it's not always at the best time, but she's a puppy, so it's cute, right? She also has the cutest little bark. I mean, it is so adorable. Now, we don't want her to bark, but she's a puppy, so it's cute, right? Not only that, but she doesn't quite know her name. I mean, she's getting good, but she doesn't quite yet know her identity and her name, and she has no idea what it means to come. She doesn't, zero, but it's okay. Why is it okay? Because look how cute she is. She's a puppy. She does not wait. She does not stay. It's okay. Now, Sophie also has a few other things. Sophie, sometimes she has some mistakes. On the hardwood floor, she'll go pee-pee where she shouldn't go, and it's okay because she's a puppy and she's cute. Sophie also, she pooped the bed, and that's not my favorite. But look at her; it's okay because she's a puppy. And it's so cute and fun when you have a little puppy like this because there are things they do. Actually, no matter what she does, it's cute. Like, look at the way she poops on the floor. Oh, look at that face. Could you be angry at that? And so we've learned that the cuteness of the new puppy trumps, or she's going to try to talk a little bit. We'll see if she can get in the mic. Okay? The cuteness of a new puppy trumps all the things that she's doing. But here's what I want to say is that if 6 months from now, Sophie doesn't know her name, it might not be as cute. If a year from now, when we tell Sophie, wait, she doesn't wait, it's not going to be the same. If 3 years from now, Sophie is still pooping the bed, it's going to be frustrating. If 10 years from now, Sophie's full grown, she's well grown, and she's still pooping the bed, then it's sad. And it's for little Sophie, our desire for her is that she would grow out of this cute puppy phase. Because as much as we love it, what I want to say is, as much as we love it, we want her to mature and grow past some things. And so, Selah, will you come get your little Sophie? Give Sophie a hand, okay? Goodbye, Sophie. Now, Sophie is so cute. It's always so cute when you talk about what a puppy does and some things that they don't do, and it's okay because they're puppies and they're cute. It's not so cute when it's our own spiritual life. It's not so cute when there are things that we are doing that we should have grown past in our faith, that we should have matured past in our walk with Jesus, and we're still doing them. You see, there's some areas where many of us, we came to know Jesus sometime prior. Maybe for you it was youth camp. You threw a stick in the fire. You raised your hand somewhere. You dedicated. Maybe it was here at the Orchard and you received Jesus. We've had so many salvations in the last few years. And maybe that you're one of those. You come to know Jesus. Perhaps you're here and you're new and you're still kicking the tires on this whole Jesus and church thing. And that's okay. There is no pressure on you to make decisions. But for those of you who have at some point decided to believe in Jesus and you have this new faith, there are those of us in that category that it's been a little while and we still don't know our name. We don't know our identity in Christ. We still don't truly know the full worth and significance. We don't know the sinlessness and the righteousness that Jesus has given us. In fact, you can see somebody in their faith, and when they were younger in their faith, there's some things that might have been cute. In fact, I remember, I'll never forget this. I was praying with this high school student, this big athlete guy. He was praying to receive Jesus, and it was such an emotional moment. I mean, he was having a moment, surrendering his life to Jesus, and he got done praying this prayer, and he's feeling it, and he looks up and he goes, that prayer stuff is awesome. He didn't say stuff. And it was cute, because it's a little puppy, he doesn't know, he's just, But here's the deal. As we mature, and some of us, we don't yet know. We don't have the faith that when Jesus calls us to come forward in faith, we don't. Or when Jesus tells you, my son, my daughter, I want you to wait on this one. We don't. We don't trust him enough. And we go for instant gratification. And there's times actually in our lives where in our character, in our holiness, we're still pooping the bed. And it's not cute after a while. You see, for many of us, we have to remember that Jesus didn't call us to salvation to just set it and forget it and have a puppy dog faith the rest of our life. He's called you to grow and mature in faith, to put down roots of faith. Let me just tell you something about the Orchard if you're new here. We do not want people to come to the Orchard and conform to religion. We want you to come and be transformed by a living God. And that means in your courage and conviction to step forward when he calls, or to wait when he says wait. Or in your holiness, in your character, to learn to some self-control and also to learn out of love to obey him. Yeah, to mature and to grow. And so thinking and praying through all these things, it is time for many of us to grow beyond the superficial, shallow faith that we've had. Maybe for a month, maybe for a decade, maybe for longer. That we would begin to grow in some areas that God has asked us to. And the reason is because the Orchard is growing in what God's asking us to step into as a church, into greater influence and impact. We'll talk about it in the future. And for you, I want you to know that God is calling you to greater influence with the people around you in this community, those who need Jesus. He's calling you into greater influence. There's seasons of your life ahead where you're going to need roots of peace. There are seasons ahead for you in life, or maybe you're in one now, where you need deeper roots of faith that you know God is with you, even in the loneliness, even in the hardship. You see, it is time for many of us to begin to mature in our faith. At the core of following Jesus is transformation. That's the evidence of somebody who's been following him. And so that's why for the fall, we've been praying through this, and I've decided that we're going to go into a sermon series about the greatest sermon ever told, ever preached. And the greatest sermon ever preached wasn't by Tim Keller or Spurgeon or any of these famous preachers. It was preached by Jesus. And it's called the Sermon on the Mount. His marketing team named it the Sermon on the Mount because it's a sermon on a mount. And so that's what he did. And the only thing more stunning than the complexity and the genius of the sermon is the beauty of the simplicity of it. In fact, the Sermon on the Mount is so rich that you could read those 3 chapters over, and you could read them, and you could read them, and you could reread them, and reread them, and still be challenged to change. And so whether you are brand new here and just checking things out, and you don't know about this whole Jesus thing, or whether you have been in church your whole life, and you're like, oh man, I know the Sermon on the Mount, I'm going to tell you this. God's Spirit has something for you. Even if you know this thing backwards and forwards, this is the master teacher, Jesus, opening up the kingdom of heaven and showing us what it's like. And in doing so, what we're to be like. So this fall series is going to be huge. And I'm excited about what we're going to get into because, again, we want to transform. We want to mature. We want to grow. So let's turn to Matthew 5, verse 1, the beginning of the world's greatest sermon. One day, as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and he sat down. His disciples gathered around him and he began to teach them. We see the crowds are there. And we see the committed disciples are there. And what does he do? Well, he sits down and begins to preach. Now, this is as far as we're going to go in Matthew 5 today. We're going to get to the words that come out of his mouth next week. But before then, I want us to look at a pattern of living that involves this sermon, that involves Jesus' life, because I want you to step into a new way of living. Because just like Sophie, our little puppy, needs to grow and mature. For many of us, there are elements that help us thrive and grow that God is asking us to step into. And so Jesus had a very obvious pattern of living. He's our designer. He's our creator. He knows the nutrients and the elements that your soul needs to thrive, your heart, your mind, who you are socially. And so he's inviting us and calling us into this pattern. It's also a pattern that we as a church as a whole need to step into. So, preaching is the first part of it. And now when he starts to preach this sermon, we're told that there's crowds that are gathered here. And we learn in different places that sometimes the crowd is hundreds, sometimes it's thousands, and at other times it's tens of thousands of people gathered around him. But within those thousands of the crowd, there are smaller, different groups as well. There are hundreds of connected people who are the congregation of his that are kind of with him, who maybe travel more often, and they're pledged to follow him. There's handfuls of committed who've journeyed with him and follow him closer. There's the core who do life with him. And all these groups are present there in those big crowds gathered in Matthew 5. And guess what? Those same crowds are gathered here on Sunday mornings at the Orchard. And I'm going to go ahead and give you the whole pattern away. Okay, you ready for this? Is there a black marker? Will you hand me that black marker over there? Thank you. I'm not going to catch it in my mouth like the announcements. Jesus, what did he do first of all? He had the crowd. We learned the crowds are around him, and what he did is he preached. You preach to the crowd. Then he had the connected, or the congregation. It's the smaller group. And these connected, we'll call them. He mobilized them. The next group he had was the committed. And for the committed, this small group, he invested. Then he had even a smaller one, the core. And when you have a core, you confide in the core. And finally, he had the one. And you rest in the one. That right there is the pattern of Jesus' ministry. That right there is a pattern that Jesus calls us into. Now, we're going to unpack this and look at what it means, but Jesus would do this. Preach to the crowds, mobilize the congregation, the connected, invest in the committed, confide in the core, and rest in the one. And this is how our church life and our spiritual lives are meant to be lived. This is the model for personal spiritual growth. This is how our church, the Orchard, and churches total, they function best. And this is how you were created. This right here is how you were created spiritually. Your spiritual life won't work right if you're fighting against the nature of your designer. You were created like this. And I hear so many people, and I've been there where I'm like, this stuff in here, where is it here? Where is this in my life? Like, I'm not feeling it. I'm not experiencing it. Oftentimes, as I diagnose where I am, I am not following the pattern of Jesus' life. What did he do? The first one is he preached to the crowd. This is a Sunday morning here at the Orchard. The crowd. We come and we participate. We gather together with people who are here for all different kinds of interests or reasons. We have community. We have friendship. We hopefully find purpose. We find places to serve and lead. And we're designed to worship and to praise. We're intended to go into God's Word and be challenged and convicted. And you'll often hear me say that our prayer about Sunday morning, the crowd serve these services, isn't that you're coming entertained. It's that you have an encounter with God. I'll tell you this. I pray and I plead that you would have an encounter with God much more than you would remember anything from my sermon. My hope is that you leave this place having encountered His Spirit and He's spoken to you. So let's look at what Jesus did when He preached. Again, verse 1. One day when He saw the crowds gathering, He went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around Him and He began to teach them. Now notice that the crowd gathered and Jesus taught, He preached to whoever showed up. Whoever was there, He preached to them. Over and over, this pattern happens. The crowd gathers, and Jesus preaches to them. I want you to notice what He doesn't do here, what He didn't do here. He didn't place elders and deacons at the door checking people's political affiliation. His sermons weren't political. And yet people of all political opinions show up to hear him teach. Jesus was preaching into one of the most explosive political environments that you can imagine even today. And he had to navigate that with wisdom and with focus. Focus because he had to point to his Father in everything. And you'll see this in his sermons, pointing to the Father. When Jesus preached, you never saw him there vetting people to see their affiliation and then just letting some in. He welcomed all to the crowd. He also didn't have any greeters or disciples at the door asking what people's private pet sins were or what lifestyle they may have chosen. He didn't station the committed there to screen the crowd and to send people away. Oh, they deal with this certain sin. Sorry, not here. Oh, you're living that lifestyle. Sorry, you can't be a part of our crowd. We won't preach to you. You see, in the crowds around Jesus, all types of people were gathered. And you can be assured that for every unique person who was gathered there on the side of that hill, they had their own unique sin issue, lifestyle, and all their background and baggage they brought with us. Just like we do. Jesus didn't announce to the crowds of multitudes that only those of certain ways of living or without certain sins were there to hear. Anyone could gather. Anyone could gather and hear his preaching. And when you see Jesus, when you like Jesus, we want to preach to whomever comes. Whoever. If someone shows up, no matter their sin, race, creed, color, gender, background, political party, spiritual belief, marital status, private sin, public disgrace, their selfish personal agenda, Jesus preached to them. And we will too. And if you don't believe me, you can read about what Jesus did. There are people who showed up just for the miracles. There are people who showed up just to see the stuff he was going to do. Like, can you believe this guy's doing these things? Can you believe? Let's just follow him around. He might feed us this time again. There were those who wanted to see what he would do next. There were those who were there. There was likely some gentlemen who were there because their wives made them come to see Jesus teach. There were people there because the person they wanted to date was there. Oh, I'll go see Jesus teach, yeah. Will you be there? Okay. There were people around Jesus because they had a loved one who was in need. They're just like us. There were people around Jesus who were involved in some secret pet sins that no one knew about. Gather around Jesus who believed what he was saying. People gathered around Jesus to hear his preaching who didn't believe any of it. People who loved him, people who hated him. There weren't any Christians gathered around him when he preached. Not yet. Some were there and they heard him preach and they wanted to overthrow the oppressive government that was there. And others were there actively working with the Romans and working with that government. They all came. He preached to them all. And at Orchard, we will do the same. We're going to preach to any who gather. We're going to follow the pattern of Jesus. This church is open to anyone who wants to gather and hear the message. You preach to the crowds. And there's no one stationed anywhere saying, vetting people to see who gets to be a part of what we're doing. That's not what Jesus modeled. No one is disqualified from hearing this. Preach to the crowd, no matter who they may be. Next, he mobilized the congregation, the connected. Luke 10, Jesus appointed 72 from within that 72 and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him into every town and place where he was about to go prepare the way, to go prepare people, to invite people. Hey, Jesus is going to come. You want to see this? Come sit with me. And the crowd, they would show up for his sermon, but those who were more involved regularly, his congregation, the connected, they would go and do ministry. They would go spread life. He put them on mission to go and invite other people into the movement, to go serve and to love and support. This is what we do right here. This is what we do in the fall when we give away, we did a reverse offering. Remember that? We passed plates for like the first time in Orchard history. We didn't take any money. We handed out $50,000 in gift cards and said, go forth, be mobilized, and go bless people. Go be mobilized and go love people and help people. You know more people that need help than just the staff and the elders. You go do it. This is when Orchard serves, our ministry that goes out there and loves people in action, stepping in and helping serve their lead there. This is up there right now. Right now, there are adults up there teaching our children, with our youth, with our students, the future of the church, serving and leading. We have greeters and production and music, all kinds of things. Just like Jesus sent out the connected to go ahead and speak and invite those people. That's what we're going to do. In fact, next Sunday is National Day. For the entire nation, someone declared it. It's National Go to Church Day. And so here's what we're going to do. Look at the chairs next to you. There's likely some empty chairs somewhere. If not, you could make some room. I don't want you to go, I wonder who's going to sit there. I want you to right now say, who am I going to invite? And here's the reason. Because just like he would send out those to go ahead of him, that you would go before Jesus and invite some people. And here's the easy thing. You're going to hear me say this a lot. This is the easy invitation. It's not like some big thing like you play some music. No, would you comest with me to the sanctuary of the Lord on Sunday, on the morrow? Whatever, I don't even know. Here's what I want you to say. This is as easy as this. Hey, will you come sit with me in church? Will you come sit with me? I'll be there. I'll get there early and wait for you. We have coffee. Sometimes we have donuts and empanadas, apparently. Hey, will you come sit with me? 9 a.m.? Will you come sit with me? I'll save you a seat. Will you come sit with me? I'll save you a seat. And you begin to invite people into what God is doing. Now, why? The reason is because we want Jesus, we want His word, His goodness, His grace to spread. And there are people, I love to see this. When you see somebody step in with a friend and a year from then, you see that they've come to know Jesus in a new way. They've perhaps been baptized. Their marriage is different. They would say their parenting different. They've found a group. They've been connected. They've got some people they can fight in. They've learned what it means to rest in God. There's been growth and maturity there. It transforms people's life. Remember, the goal is transformation. That's what happens. And so we're not inviting people for any trophy for this church. We're not interested in getting big just to be big. We're interested in growing the kingdom and having people come to know Jesus. And so, the chairs around you. Hey, come sit with me. I'll save you a seat. Jesus didn't just preach and mobilize. He broke it down a step further. He went to the mountainside to pray, and he spent the night praying to God. When the morning came, he called his disciples and chose 12 of them. He chose his small group. He went and he chose his group. You preach to the crowd. You mobilize the connected. You invest in the committed. You invest in the committed. Those small groups of people. From this point on, he spent so much time with the 12. They were together. They would go to the crowds. They would be the connected. But this group of his 12 disciples, they were together through thick and thin, through all things. They followed him. They got to know him. They got to know each other. Can you imagine with 12 guys like that, the different personalities? Peter's sarcasm. John's hopes in the way he was so lovey-dovey, and they're talking about their families and their weaknesses. They got to know each other. They got to know each other so well. And that's what small groups are about. It's about knowing somebody and being known. They did life together. This group right here, this group size right here has been proven by the military as they have researched to be the size that's most transformative. And so if you and your faith are at a sticking point, you're like, I kind of go, and I do some stuff. But like Sophie, it's time to mature in some areas. And for you, it may be it's time to get in a place and be known and know others and talk about some things. He took it a step further in Mark 9, Jesus with the 12. He leaves them and he calls some other people. It says this: Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up on a high mountain where they were all alone, and he transfigured before them. What does this mean? It means he revealed his identity to them. They saw a side of him that no one else got to see. Who in your life knows what you're going through really? Who knows where to keep you accountable? Who knows the sin issues and the boundaries that you're crossing? Who sees you and unlike anyone else sees you and say, hey man, but let's talk about that. Who do you hold accountable? Who holds you accountable? This was his inner circle, his core, and they got to see Jesus in a way that no one else got to. You see, you preach to the crowd. You mobilize the congregation, the connected, and you invest in the committed, and you confide in the core. Who's your core? Who's there for you in those areas? And from there, Jesus would oftentimes leave everyone, even his inner circle. Listen to this in Matthew 14 as he would retreat. It says, Jesus fed 5,000 men, women, and children. Then he told his disciples he was going to get in a boat and go ahead of them on the other side. He dismissed the crowds. After he dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Over and over, Jesus shows a healthy spiritual life involves a pattern of pulling aside to be refilled and refreshed in the presence of your God. There are some areas that we do not grow unless we are in the presence of God. Learning his word, applying it to our lives, looking in there and finding his true nature, and then adjusting to how he calls us. Jesus needed time alone with God. If he needs time alone to refuel, what do you think we need? Same thing, to rest in the one. Jesus models a healthy and thriving spiritual life. And for you and I, as we follow, if we want to grow into maturity beyond where we are as an individual or as a church, it's important that we look into this pattern. I want us to look at this and then look compared to your life. Where am I up here? How am I doing? You see, many of us, it may give us insight on why we're not maturing and growing the way that we want to, or that we hoped. I'm not experiencing some things that I thought I would. I come, I come enough, I come, but where's this stuff? And oftentimes it's because God is calling us to some very intimate moments with Him, and to be honest about our issues, our hopes, dreams, and failures, to get to know people and be known, and then to be mobilized to go forth and serve and lead and invite. So here on Sunday mornings, in this place right now, what do? Well, my prayer for us is that we have catalytic moments, that we have moments where we hear something and go, I'm going to be different. I'm going to change. I want to make an adjustment. That's what we pray for. And today we're part of the crowd in here that we would be challenged to make some changes. Again, if you're here and you're just checking out this God thing, kicking the tires, it's okay. You got all the freedom in the world. For those of you who say you believe and are following it, and you're wondering, I want some more maturity, I want some more growth, how are we doing on this? Here on Sundays, we worship God together because we're made to worship, and we have an amazing band of talented people. We celebrate together when people get baptized or saved. We have a sense of belonging on Sundays. We're a part of something bigger as we gather here from all up and down the valley and even worldwide. We're filled up. Our kids are up there being taught and fed spiritually. Our youth, just like in Jesus' times, we're surrounded by people we may know, and we're probably in a church like this, and you're like, there's a lot of people I just don't know anymore. Just like the crowds of Jesus. And we hopefully leave here with a new direction and inspiration to go and live and love differently than when we came in. Sometimes in here we make bold decisions. And in the past year, many of you have made bold decisions to follow Jesus in a new way. Maybe into salvation, maybe in a character issue. But in this room, we make bold decisions to step out and be transformed. We're a gathering of people for all different kinds of reasons. But when it comes to authentic spiritual growth, like Jesus modeled, we must see that while Sunday morning is great, it simply is not enough to feed our souls the way that God intended. This is not a knock on the orchard or on the band. It's not talking about my preaching or anything that is good, or it's not the way. God did not intend Sunday morning crowd gatherings to be your one and done for the week. That I go there and I get filled up and I am just good until next week. Do you know how long it lasts? I mean, if you have kids, it can last till the parking lot. I don't know about your kids, but these preachers' kids, sometimes, and I'm ashamed to admit this, they will fight on the way home. You'll never believe it, and she's not here so I can say it, my wife. Amy and I have fought on the way home. It's hard to remember the good vibes from a sermon when you're fighting with your spouse or kids on the way home. I mean, you get back to the house and go, everybody to your rooms. Daddy's watching football. The sermon was on loving and grace. I don't care what the sermon was about. Just me? Okay. Apparently, church is a place where you come and confess your sin. We got to know that Sunday is not meant to be everything for us. We can leave this place and be done by the time you hit the door and get a donut. So we can't, if we are feeding ourselves on one day a week, maybe twice a month, it's going to be anemic. Jesus made it clear. He calls us in every place that we are to move closer. Wherever you find yourself, to move closer. In fact, some would be only a part of the crowd for the spiritual nourishment, like Sophie, like little Sophie. She needs maturity. She needs growth. And some of us, that's what we need. And Sunday mornings is not enough. If we depend solely on Sunday morning for our spiritual nourishment, we're going to be spiritually anemic. And it's not because of what's being served here, but it's because it was never intended to be the full meal. A lack of nourishment leaves your body fatigued, and it will leave your faith fatigued through hard seasons. You will find your passion waning and draining because it was never intended to be everything we need nourish-wise. It also, we can become confused as we battle the culture. If we're not resting in the one, if we're not confiding about our stuff, if we're not being honest and discussing, we'll find the pressure from the culture bleeding into the truth that we claimed and we believed at one point. And there'll be confusion. I used to believe some of this stuff, but man, some of this just seems so outdated. I really think they have a good point over here. And a lot of that is because we are relying on this solely for 1 hour on Sunday, and then we go and we're discipled the rest of our lives, the rest of our week, by different truth or lack thereof. When we rely solely on Sundays, we become anxious because we're not rooted in the solid peace of Jesus. And I don't know about you, but just life brings me enough to be anxious about. Between kids and illnesses and people and stuff and money and politics and our world and there is enough to be anxious about. And I find that if this is all I'm relying on, it's not enough to bring me the peace of Christ that surpasses understanding. If my spiritual life is dependent on Sunday morning gatherings, you will not mature the way God intended. If I'm solely dependent on Sunday mornings, I'll find my faith fatigued, my resolve weakened, my mind anxious, and my beliefs confused. So I want us to just be honest for a second, and vulnerability is something that we value here. How are you doing? In your spiritual path, in your spiritual walk, in your spiritual path, how are you doing with following Jesus into some of these ways? If we want to grow, oftentimes we come closer. We see that we come to the connected and we have a mission. We're on mission. We're commissioned to go forth and share and invite, to love people outside of this room, to take what's in the crowd in here and take it out there to our lives. Stepping out in faith to invite somebody, hey, come sit with me. It might seem like either a big deal or a small deal compared to you, but it's part of the way that God asked us to live our lives, and he asked his disciples to. As we gather on Sunday mornings and go out on mission, but there's still more needed for a thriving life. And this is one that's so important. This right here, invested in the committed, the small group, his 12. Here at the Orchard, these are our groups. And I want you to truly hear this next sentence. Our small groups here at the Orchard, I'm not asking you to check out a program. It's not a program. It's the next vital step for your spiritual life. The next vital step for your spiritual life is to get into community like Jesus was with his 12 every day of his ministry. Jesus himself modeled this. It's a place where you share requests, hopes, successes, laughs. It's a place where you're known and you know others. Instead of sitting in rows here in the Orchard, we want to be a church that is known in circles. The sitting in rows isn't enough. It's to be known in a circle. And then also this fall we have some new things starting. We have our equipping center with discipleship pastor David Corson, who I've traveled around the world with, and I just respect him so immensely. And we're kicking off 3 different courses. The Book of Revelation study that he's teaching, a marriage study by the Lytells. And I was wondering, who needs to be in a marriage study to help their marriage? And after all the marriage I've been through and all the people I've counseled, I realized it's probably 100% of marriages. So I would encourage you, especially husbands, man, talk to your wife and say, would you go to this with me? Don't be the guy that's just getting dragged to something. Say, let's do this together. Let's commit to go to this on Thursday nights, and let's get in this marriage group. Then we also have a missions perspective groups. And this is a strong class where you learn what God's doing globally. And we have some missionaries coming in that I've met on their island who are coming to ours, and I can't wait for you to meet. And these are preparation for some of these things. Okay, if you already have authentic community in a group, I would encourage you, if you're looking to expand your knowledge or go deeper in the Word or get some practical help and support in your marriage, sign up for these classes. Sign up for these courses. Spiritual growth needs these things. It's vital. It needs the large catalytic moment. The inspirational moments. It needs to be sent out and go and feel, like put your faith into practice and speak and invite. And it needs to be known in a group of 12 and to get to know. And it needs to be honest with a few. It needs to be open and filled in the presence of God. This is full spiritual life. And here in the Western Church of America, oftentimes what we will do is we'll just cross this out and say, I'm a Christian, and that's what I do. And we wonder why. We're more like Sophie than we'd like to admit. This isn't an indictment. This is an invitation. An invitation as a church. Listen, I know you. We know each other. We are a church who makes bold decisions in this place. I want to encourage you to step into some of these things. And at the end of the service, when you walk out there, go check out what we have to offer and sign up for something. Take a chance. Step out in faith. When Jesus says, come, know your identity and step out in courage, right? Orchard, I want you to consider this today. And it's actually a call to action that I want you to go out and sign up for some of these groups. We got Pastor Dan, who has increased and we hired Dan a year and a half ago. The work you have done has been amazing. And the number of groups that we have in this church and the community we have that's growing is simply amazing to me as God continues to grow us. And I encourage you, if you want to lead or host a group, email him. If you want to be part of a group, go out and sign up. Check out all that we have to do. These have the potential not only to transform your personal life and your marriage, but also our church. And I talked to somebody this year who was so honest with me, and she said this. She goes, I know you always tell us to get involved in these groups, like every year. And you go, like, oh, it'll change your life. And you hear that, and you're like, man, I've been a part of groups. It didn't change my life, right? You go, okay, Pastor, I've been a part of a group before. Different kind of groups, study groups, this group, that group. And she said, you've always said that. And so I signed up for one. She goes, I can't imagine my life without it now. Talking through my marriage, talking through what I'm going through, having people who pray for me, who know me and support me. She goes, I did not believe you when you first said it. But I believe you because I've experienced it. So if you're finding yourself in a stagnant place of faith, if you're finding that you have a desire to grow and mature and you're kind of stuck, it might be we're not living the pattern that Jesus invited us into. And I would ask you, step into this. As a church, Pastor Dan and his team have worked hard to prepare all these things for us. So, there's proof in this. The Bible talks about what happens when you follow Jesus in his pattern. In Acts 2, the church is launched. And the church was Jesus' idea. He said he's launched this to the church, and they're going to follow him. And here's what it says that's happening in their midst. It says the church committed themselves to the teaching, to doing life together, to communion, to prayer. Do you see that each of those is lining up on these areas? Everyone was in awe of the wonders and signs that were happening. All the believers, they lived together in harmony, holding everything in common. They put the harmony and peace of Jesus above all their other passionate affiliations on earth. Do you see that? They sold whatever was needed and pooled their resources to help each other. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple, courts for worship. They gathered together in homes. They had meals together with genuine love. They praised God. They enjoyed each other. They celebrated. And what did God do? He added to their number daily those who are being saved. I want the Orchard to be a church where people are being saved, where they're being transformed, where marriages are being transformed and saved, where children's trajectories are being forever, eternally transformed, where people in addiction are being set free. Orchard, I don't want us to just do good church and have a good Sunday. I want us to be a church where God is transforming us. And we are a church that makes bold decisions. And today I'm asking you to do that, to step into this kind of life. So today, as we leave, after some worship, we're going to walk through those doors. I want you to take a chance, sign up for something. Also, I want you to look at those chairs around you, and I want you to say, here's who I'm going to invite for next week, for this new series. Will you come sit with me? I'll meet you for the later service. Let me pray for you. Father God, I am simply not a good enough preacher to change lives. We need you, Jesus. We need your Spirit. And so right now, would you speak clearly, and would you prompt us and call us, ask us in the places we need to step out, that we would courageously follow you in the way you asked us to live. You are our creator, our designer. And for us in stagnant faith or looking for more, Lord, speak to us now as we worship you. In Jesus' name, amen. You're free to take communion during this time, and let's stand and let's worship.